Today I'm going to be beating Persona 3 with only Makoto. That's right, only using the main MC of this game. Here are my rules. First off, whenever I can, I must have an empty party outside of Makoto at all times. There are points where the game will force me to have other people in my party, and in those moments there, all those party members can ever do a guard, except for the occasion where I accidentally forget about the whole thing, when I go to heal Makoto using Makoto's turn and accidentally heal one of the other party members because by default, it picks the person with the lowest health, and so I have to burn one of the other party members' turn to just heal Makoto because I made a mistake. There are of course certain exceptions because there are certain tutorials and stuff along those lines that force me to actually use the other party members to attack in various different ways, but outside of that, I must always guard with these party members when I am forced to have them. How difficult is it going to be, and how much trouble do I end up having? Let's get into it. Skipping over the tutorial battle as well as the tutorial floor in Tartarus, we skip to the first time we're actually free to explore Tartarus on our own. Ultimately, this progress didn't seem to be too difficult first, but whilst I was going through floor 4, I got a bit unlucky because I had Aphorus equipped as my current persona, and all three of the shadows that I came across in this party here all used fire moves. I found myself my first death, which is quite funny to say the least. I was just very accepting of that. Yep, that just happened. I could have done better things there, but oh well. I then find my way to my next death pretty quickly because I got really unlucky with the final shot missing on the shadow that I was about to kill. They land an ice attack which also freezes me, meaning that I miss a turn, and then the next turn they land a critical melee hit and then kill me with an ice attack. God, that is just unlucky. RNG just decided to say, nah, you. Anyway, eventually I finally make it to floor 5, which is where I score my first checkpoint. Here's some fun information that will totally not screw me over multiple times over in this entire run, but the only time where you can ever save your progress in Tartarus is when you use a teleporter to go back to the first floor. Something that I advise you to do if you try to do this run yourself. Anytime you come across a teleporter that allows you to return to the first floor, make sure to always use it because at least it catches your current progress in Tartarus as well as all the other stuff that's happened, so you don't have to worry about fighting that all again when you inevitably die. I then decided to take on the Gatekeeper of floor 5 and successfully do it the first time round, which is pretty good, but this is where I call Tartarus for the day. Jumping back into Tartarus the next day, I do try to go more into floor 6, but unfortunately the game won't let me because it wants me to have at least one other party member, so I go back and grab Yukari. Why does it want me to have another party member? Because it's time to explain shift and all-out attacks. So once I do this, I kind of just have to roam through Tartarus for a little while until I find a return portal at floor 9 to go back and drop Yukari off so I can go back to being just with Makoto again. Unfortunately, this also means that Yukari saps some of the experience that I kind of want on Makoto, but that's neither here nor there. On floor 10, I get my first major arcana from a shuffle time, which is the Fool, meaning that I gain even more experience from battles, which is super useful. But at this point in time, I'm also currently grinding through with basically no MP, which is kind of a fun situation, but it's not the end of the world. We make it to the 11th floor, which is our next Gatekeeper floor, so using the teleport to go back to the entrance to save our current progress, we head back in, heal up, get some more SP, and then take on the boss. Unfortunately, it did not go my way, and I do end up dying. I retry the battle to attempt to make better decisions here, but it doesn't work out again. This time I just return to the entrance and then just grind out Tartarus for a bit until I hit level 10, then I go and fuse my first major persona of this run, Chimera. Now while Chimera, because it's one of the ones that were available for me at the time, that also had a resistance to punch and fire with its only weakness being dark, which at this point in time isn't exactly a concern because your likelihood of coming across shadows that can use dark moves isn't exactly high this early on in Tartarus. That combined with the fact that this is a physical damage persona, it allows me to use a lot less SP throughout my Tartarus grinding sessions, leaving more for when I come to the actual boss fights themselves. And rather than taking on the Gatekeeper with this new information, I decided to just end the Tartarus run for the day to refresh for the next time. Next Tartarus run the next day, I start from floor 2 this time just to grind some more levels as we head back up to the next Gatekeeper floor, and the first shadow I fight not only gives me a shuffle time, but also gives me the major arcana of Fool immediately, which is super handy when I'm trying to do some grinding out because just right off the bat I'm getting bonus XP that I wouldn't have without it. On floor 8 I gain my second major arcana, giving me an arcana burst, which is super handy as well, but not long afterwards I use an odd morsel, gain fear from it when I'm healing, and then get double critted out, which yeah, that's not great, especially considering I hadn't made a point to actually, I don't know, use the teleporter to exit Tartarus at any point. So, you know how I got that nice start with the Major Arcana? Yeah, no, that's all gone, all worthless, all wasted, because I never made the attempt to go back to Tartarus' entrance, even though I very much know that that is kind of a thing I should be doing. Instead of redoing all that grind again, I decided to just say, nah, screw it, I'm gonna go give the Gatekeeper another attempt, and though it took a little bit of effort, I do inevitably make it through and beat this Gatekeeper, which is pretty cool. Did I learn my lesson from before and actually return back to the entrance to save the fact that I beat the boss? What do you mean I didn't do that? What do you mean I would die later because I got unlucky with RNG and got frozen when I had 6 health remaining? Whoops! Anyway, I beat the boss again, returned to the entrance of Tartarus to actually save that progress, and I managed to just plow through all the floors until floor 17, which is where the next Gatekeeper is, though this time I just check out of Tartarus again. Next day we jump back into Tartarus, we clear out the Gatekeeper and make our way up to floor 22, which is the border floor for this section of Tartarus, meaning that we're done with Tartarus for the time being. Though I still do come back the next day to do some more grinding in Tartarus, getting myself up to level 14 because the higher level I am, the more wiggle room I have for any stupidity, and then I just kinda burn through the next chunk of time up until the full moon, using my nights to go to the arcade to boost the physical stats of Shamira, as well as start working on the various social stats, because I am still going to make some form of an attempt to get the social links maxed out in this run, some form. Now we reach the first actual boss fight of this challenge, the first full moon. This is going to be an interesting one because A, you're forced to have all the party members you can have at this point, both Junpei and Yukari, though this is kind of a common theme with all the full moons where you're just forced to have a full party 9 times out of 10, which is kind of annoying, but we're not going to worry too much about that. I breezed through all the smaller enemies in the actual train section itself, but now we make it to the Priestess, which is quite an interesting fight to say the least, because it really does just become RNG dependent on the back end of it, because the Empress herself has got 2 different moves that she can use. She could either use an Ice Storm or a Bafula, and there's probably a few other things that she could also do, but those are the 2 common ones. The Ice Storm is splash damage to all of your party, but it does less damage than Bafula, and then even when there's only Makoto standing, it's still kind of like a toss-up on whether she does Bafula or Ice Storm. If she does an Ice Storm, you can get away with going for some damage when you have the other little shadow doing some light damage every now and then too. But if you get unlucky and get a Bafula, you're kind of forced into healing. And if you get unlucky and get Bafula twice in a row, or just an unlucky combo of moves in a row, you get killed by the Priestess because you went for the attack. It's kind of quirky and very RNG dependent, but eventually you can push through it if you're just patient and take your time with just going over this boss fight. Yes, you have a time limit, quote unquote, but it's not exactly too bad if you've made sure you've leveled up enough where you still do a fair amount of damage. Anyway, eventually we make it through and beat the Priestess.
Okay, I knew that last hit was going to kill it. Well, I had a funny feeling it did. I just didn't want to do it in case I missed or it wasn't quite enough, because then I would be dead. Just smartness, being cautious really. I had more than enough time to wait another loop.
Jumping into our next round of Tartarus shenanigans, it ultimately goes pretty fine. There's nothing interesting particularly happens until I hit the boss floor at level 27, which is when I jump back and finally create a new persona of decent variety of Oberon. Oberon's just another decent persona with a nice variety of resistances, with being resistant to both light and dark, as well as flat out being null to electric type damage, which is pretty useful, as well as just being a good electric based persona that also has a few other abilities that I've carried over from previous personas that I already had. Mixing this with Shamir, we have a good pair of early game personas that will help us move through this block a little easier. We then beat the Gatekeeper and leave Tartarus for the day. On the 11th, we clock back in the Tartarus and continue our going through the block, and we come across our first strong enemy, which I almost wipe the floor off until it gets up and does a double crit, which wipes the floor off me from basically full health, which is always fun. After this death, I decided to go back to the first block and do it all over again and grind for a little bit before I head back to floor 27 and continue from there. We come across a strong enemy again, this time completely wiping the floor with him. Whilst grinding through this block, I do come across a spirit drain in one of the shuffle times, which is super handy. I was actually trying to chase one of these because it's going to make doing these a little bit easier because I won't have to worry about burning through my SP items as much. Instead, I could just slap spirit drain on one of my units, heck, even grab the overpowered DLC unit just so I have something I can persona that I can just sit on and cruise whilst I suck up some SP for a bit before whacking them with my normal personas, just so SP is no longer as big as a problem as it currently is, because that's the current issue I mainly have. I'm always burning through all of my SP all of the time, consuming all the SP items that I build up, and it's just kind of annoying and problematic. We make it to the checkpoint floor of 34 and check out our TARDIS for the day. We come back in the next day. I have some struggles with the first of the pair of gatekeepers here, but then we quickly steamroll the second one, and then I check out TARDIS again. I then duplicate the Spirit Drain card so I can put it on Obrion. And here's where I've come across for the first time the first issue that I'm going to see with this run, and that is insta-kill effects. Because unlike with the normal game when you have a full party, it tends to prioritize targeting your party members and not the MC unless it's a party-wide insta-kill spell. These will only ever target Makoto, which means the odds of the insta-kill are far more scarier, because if it does affect and hit, that's the end of that current run in Tartarus, which is not fun to say the least, until you have a huge variety of homoculuses, but that takes a bit to actually start collecting. And what makes it even better, resist can't save you, and the game made sure to tell me that the very first time I die to an insta-kill effect. Anyway, jumping to floor 40 is where we find our next gatekeeper. Now, this guy gave me a challenge in my initial playthrough of Persona 3 because this gatekeeper will focus in on the weakness of your 3 party members, and if it successfully hits one of their weaknesses, he will then aim in on the weakness that the MC currently has and wreck you very, very fast. Fortunately, I don't have any party members, so his pattern of attacks is completely funny because he will never hit my weakness. And with that gatekeeper down, we're at the end of this section of Tartarus thus far. Jumping to the next full moon, the Emperor and the Empress. This was honestly quite easy and nowhere near as difficult or annoying as the Priestess was previously, so we very quickly wiped the floor with this one. Didn't even need to take multiple attempts, we did it first time.
Which don't need to worry about. Hey yo. Why do I? That feels good. Akihiko's alive, so we get some of the XP, which sucks, actually. I wish it was like a metaphor and I can just pass his turn so he's not guarding, just so he dies quicker. But there's not much I can do about that.
With the second full moon out of the way, before the next section of the block unlocks, we get access to Theurgies for the first time. This is probably going to become one of the key mechanics we'll make use of when it comes to the second half of this run. Not quite yet, because we don't have access to some of the more extremely powerful ones as of yet. We will soon. But do grab the Jack Frost and Jack-O-Lantern Theurgy, which just requires you to fuse both of those personas to get to both of those personas to unlock said Theurgy. We now just start blasting through Tartarus, clearing the Gatekeeper at level 47, getting ourselves an Arcana Burst at level 52, but then we come across our next little pain point. Right now it hasn't exactly caused me too many issues, but you know, status effects are a thing that exists in this game, and there are 2 of them that are quite problematic to get on this type of run. The first one that will get the most is Confuse. If you don't know what Confuse does, basically it means you roll through a number from 1 to 3, 1 being you select a random item in your inventory and use it, 2 being that your character throws away a bunch of money, or 3 you do absolutely nothing and you just pass your turn. You have no control over what actually happens here, but you get the gist of it. You see, this is the point where status effects start really rearing their ugly head, especially Confuse, which can cause a lot of problems when it's just Makoto, because now you have to see brute force through like 3 turns of confusion before you can finally do something again, and 9 times out of 10 you have to heal and then pray you don't get confused yet again. I managed to get away a handful of times with this nonsense, but eventually the confusion does get me and kills me without anything I can particularly do about it, because RNG can be a bitch. And I'm not joking when I say this, outside of something that we'll talk about way later in this playthrough, I'm 90% sure that I die the most to confusion in this entire run. It is the bane of my existence, especially in the second half of this block, because that's where it's predominantly found and causes me all these damn issues, even though I'm pretty far ahead when it comes to levels. It doesn't matter, confusion and RNG combined makes for a bitch of a time. But eventually we make it to the end of this block. Now we jump into the third full moon, which we deal with the Hierophant and then the Lovers right afterwards. The Hierophant wasn't really that much of a problem, pretty easy to deal with, didn't really have any qualms there. The Lovers, on the other hand, oh boy, Charm is an absolute bitch. If I was having trouble with Confused before, Charm is even worse. Well, not really, they're both the same. Actually, no, they really are, because at least with Confusion, there's like a chance that you might use an item that either heals Makoto or does damage to the enemy you're fighting. Charm, that ain't happening. You just won't do shit. It's great. I love it. I totally don't, actually. It's here in the fight against the Lovers where I break my rule. The only time I actually do break the rule. You see, one of the rules I said at the start of this video was that whenever I'm forced to have additional party members, the only thing they're allowed to do is guard unless I accidentally heal one of them instead of Makoto via Makoto's turn because of the game's defaulting to the person with the lowest health. I can heal Makoto with their turn. Here, I decided, because I got sick and tired of dealing with Charm, that I would use one turn from Yukari to de-charm Makoto. Yukari was at 1 health, which is kind of funny. She dies immediately afterwards, like all the other party members do. But I do it just once because I was sick and tired of dealing with Charm. It's because doing this just once, I get through the boss fight here. Honestly, I leave this one up to you guys and how you feel about this one, on me breaking my rule this one time here in this boss fight just so I can get through, because I got sick of dealing with Charm, especially after the entire day beforehand just dealing with Confusion over and over again. Yes, there could have been many of ways that I could have built to prevent this, but would have required a lot more grinding to maybe get a persona that has some form of fast heal, or trying to hunt down an accessory that makes it so I don't have to worry about status effects as much. Ultimately, I did what I did. I used Yukari once to de-charm Makoto and then got through this full moon.
There it is. Waiting for it. Waiting for it to happen.
Thank goodness. Now it's time for a counterattack.
You recovered that immediately? I mean, I will take that. I will take the immediate recovery from the Charm. That's actually awesome.
Jumping into our next section of Tartarus, we have the first half of Block 3, and this is so much easier than what the previous block was, purely because A, Confusion is nowhere near as common anymore, because the shadow that was predominant in the previous half block is no longer here. Confusion is not going to be as much as a problem just by default. And also, I'm making more utilization of Sentiel at this point. He's no longer just the persona I sit on to drain SP. He's just kind of like, hey, he good, has high stats, and it's just safer to sell on it because I just can't be stuffed dealing with this mess. At this point, I'm starting to get really high up there in levels where it's not really much of a problem anyway, to the point where I not only fuse King Frost, but also get Black Frost by the end of this block, which Black Frost, by the way, has access to fast heal at level 42, which he's 1 level away from, which means our Confusion and Charm problems will be pretty much gone at this point. Now we jump to the fourth full moon. This isn't exactly much to write home about. It's both Chariot and Justice. The main problem with them is that they are extremely tanky when they're together, and you have to do something like a Theurgy in order to get them split apart when you're solo, because, well, you don't do much else damage otherwise when they're put together. And ultimately, I just kept killing Justice over and over again, burning Chariot turn on just restoring him, because Justice is very vulnerable to any non-physical attack, and it was just slowly whittling away Chariot every time I had Theurgies. It wasn't really too difficult of a challenge, especially considering both Mitsuru and Igus hung around far longer than I ever expected to, so Justice was continuously focusing in on the other two with insta-kill attacks, even though it didn't particularly matter because I was still using Santiel at this point, which also has immunity to light attacks, which is funny. I don't know, it's just like at this point where this is the section where the game starts getting a lot easier to deal with. It's the earlier stages of this challenge where you have most of your problems, and it gets easier the further in you go, the more over-leveled you become, the more you develop your persona kit. Jumping into the second half of the third block, we do the same as always. It's getting pretty easy at this point, especially with having both Black Frost, Santiel, and various other fun personas at this point. We just grind through, and eventually I do hit level 54. Level 54 unlocks us access to something quite grand and a persona that will pretty much carry us through the rest of the game, Siegfried. For those of you who haven't played Persona 3 Reload yet, the basic understanding here is that physical based attacks, whether it be slashing, blunt or pierce based attacks, is extremely powerful in this game. They usually are the best of the best outside of the shadows that have immunity to them, which isn't exactly too many of them when you look at it. Siegfried is a level 54 persona that you can get access to very early that you can also build to be extremely powerful right off the bat, and then if you have collected Mithras along the way, which is a level 24 persona, you also get access to a Theurgy move called Scarlet Havoc. Which, in my opinion, if you combine it with a Siegfried that you was built as a massive multi-target slashing powerhouse, I would personally say that Scarlet Havoc is probably the best Theurgy of the game. Yes, technically Armageddon is better as it does a guaranteed 9,999 damage at the cost of all but one of your health. Scarlet Havoc is just an uber powerful move that also effectively one-shots most things you throw it at, especially if you've combined it with your Siegfried, who you've built pretty well. After this, we just effectively skip to the next full moon, which is about 20 days away after my run in Tartarus here, though one thing I'll point out here that I haven't really said too much elsewise, I have been actually grinding up stats and social links and stuff along those lines, and now that I have Siegfried, I'm making use of the arcade to increase Siegfried's strength as much as I possibly can to make his physical damage all the more stupid. Into the next full moon, this is going to be an interesting one. Now we've got Shinji, Ken, and Koromaru. We have the highest level party members we can have in the game. They're not going to get any higher unless they somehow survive through boss fights, which, trust me, someone will eventually. Anyway, I do end up dying once this fight purely because I let myself do that. Mainly because I did burn a Scarlet Havoc into the Hermit when he was probably about 200 health away from triggering his second charging buff. Meaning that it dealt 3,000 critical damage, but actually only like a small smidgen of it actually hit his health because boss fight trigger had to happen. Honestly, quite annoying that. Second round went a lot better purely because I knew to trigger his second phase of charging before I let loose the second Scarlet Havoc in his face. Also, funny thing, I do run out of normal healing potions, so I have to use some of the big chains that I've collected at this point in time. Funny thing about that, Shinji's still alive in both of them. So guess who makes it to the end of the boss fight, because I kind of had to heal both of us because that was my only way of healing. Damn it, Shinji, I needed that XP.
Still got some hidden potential.
That's annoying. I mean, it's one of those things where Shinji still being alive didn't actually change much of that. Makoto still copped every major thing.
Guess what? It's time for a new block in Tartarus. Isn't that amazing? Not really, it's not changing much, but hey, let me tell you what I've been doing for the past little bit now. Because I'm now so far ahead in levels, the normal shadows really don't matter to anything. They don't give enough XP to really matter the time you burn on hitting them. You would literally could spend that same amount of time blitzing through the floors and just recycling a few times, getting only the strong and rare enemies, and probably end up with more XP that way. And so that's what we're doing. All shadows run away from me at this point. I'm so over leveled it doesn't particularly matter anymore. But hey, that's how Tartarus is currently going. Now we jump to the dreaded 6th full moon on the 4th of October. It's not dreaded because the boss is hard for any particular reason. Really, the only thing you need to keep in mind is be aware that the roulette wheel can just nuke your health for 300, so make sure you're never below that when it's time for a roulette wheel. There's not much more about that one. But no, story reasons, that's why it's the dreaded day. So yeah, we thrash through this full moon boss like it's nobody's business.
Holy shit. Oh! Wow! That was a lot of damage!
Strength has been
What shit? That was... Holy shit. And we did almost 4,000 damage there.
I have a really bad feeling about
That's
this.
crazy insane. Holy shit. That was insane. a casual 7,400 damage to strength, and then just a charged Brave Blade did almost 4k damage to Fortune. Holy shit.
Scarlet Havoc and Sigfrid just doing work, as he has been for the past while now, and then we lose Shinji. Ooh, that's fun. What, you weren't expecting spoilers? I'd kid.
Oh, that scene always sucks. But don't worry, the roller coaster is not over yet.
We continue into the second half of this fourth block in Tartarus, and well, I mean, there's not really much to talk about anymore. You saw what happened the previous full moon, though I decided that it'd be a great idea to take an attempt at the Reaper, just because we're getting up to a point where I'm now doing lots and lots of damage, so save up both my own theurgies and Fuka's theurgy, and not yet. Got absolutely wrecked.
Dun, dun. Ow! He hurts, but we expected that.
Leader, say something,
Holy shit. Oh. I think you might be a bit under level for that. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Jumping to the seventh full moon, Strager casually reminds me that, you know, Sigfrid has a weakness to darkness that I need to be kind of aware of. Whoopsie daisy. Either way, I quickly blitzed through them right after that first mistake, and we jumped into the Hanged Man. Not exactly too problematic, we quickly blitzed through him with the fun personas that I already have collected here. You already get the gist at this point. We're just blitzing through the full moons, and it's at this point where the story really kicks into overdrive, but that doesn't matter for this. We jump into the next section of Tartarus that's unlocked and blitz through it as always, and we jump over to Chidori's fight, which I've made a very hard attempt at trying to kill her, but the game was not too happy with that and healed her back to full. I mean, it's a scripted fight that's meant to go one way and only one way, so understandable. Have a nice day. Jumping over the full moon that is just more story, we jump into the second half of the second last block of Tartarus, and this time, after blitzing through the entire thing, I decided to take another attempt at fighting the Reaper. I died an endless amount of times until someone in chat reminded me about the persona Arabaki. A persona that once leveled up high enough will have access to pretty much repel all physical attacks, which is a useful thing to do because when you have been affected from the Reaper with some form of status effects, the Reaper is more likely to utilize its physical attacks rather than any form of magic based damage, unless it goes for a nuking Megalodonia, but that's its own problem. So after getting this persona in and leveling it up to the level that it needs to be in order to have its reflect, we then go again against the Reaper and finally conquer the Reaper.
Two homoculuses. And we got a crit. You are a god!
Good job, everyone.
Slash amp's fine. I would have preferred the fuck, what is it called? The attack that does severe thing to all of it. No, I'm saying this is redundant as hell, but hey, we'd take it. Two bloody buttons! That's right, we're getting double items from Tartarus right now. We got two of them bloody buttons.
Jumping over the second to last full moon, we jump into the last block of Tartarus, which again, we blitz through it like it's nobody's business, but this time around we do a lot more grinding, because A, I'm trying to get my Arcana Burst up so I can get Q level cards, because I'm chasing Vorpal Blade from a Q level sword. After a lot of grinding, I decided to take on the final Monad Door, and when I blitz through all four samurai there, I get greeted with the Vorpal Blade card.
Ah, shit. How did you get completely filled? It's Vorpal Blade. Yeah.
awesome saws. We can finally get Sigvard to the best he can be because we got Slash Amp earlier, and now he's just a potent slash splashing killing machine. And now we jump to the 31st of January, the final full moon and the finale of this game and run. So here's some interesting information that I've kind of not said too much about. Where are my social links at this point in time? Well, here's a fun thing. After focusing all in on trying to get them all done from like November, I got to the end of January with only 3 levels remaining. 2 from Igus and 1 from the Chariot. Because unfortunately I made some mistakes earlier on in the run that made it so that it was impossible for me to complete all the social links by the end of this, which is really unfortunate. Which means I don't have Orpheus Tellus, which means I decided to not make the attempt on fighting Elizabeth. Though I don't really think that's really much of this part of this challenge, because you fight Elizabeth super boss on your own anyway. That is just what it is. It's not really this challenge type deal, so it's neither here nor there. So on the 31st, I do fuse the 2 personas needed to get the Armageddon Theurgy, which is going to be super handy to have for the finale of Nyx, and then we jump into the final battles. First up, we have Jin, who quickly annihilates me because, you know, Sigvard has a weakness to Dark, and rather than just slightly adjusting my strategy just to tank his nonsense and get through him, I decide, nope, I'm going to blitz through Tartarus for a while to try and get a Repel or Null Dark, which comes from like the maxed out Arcana Burst cards, which you can only do on the 31st. After being unsuccessful for a little while, I decided to just take another attempt at Jin, and this time around with a bit of smarts, I blitz through him with no problems. We then move on to Zakaya, which isn't really too hard of a battle. It's just stay on Messiah because he's got no weaknesses, and it's just wise to do because Zakaya will just immediately target whatever weakness it has access to on your personas. And eventually we just take him down after some annoyances of just burning all of our SP because he likes to take all of that. Then we jump into the final battle against Nyx. This isn't actually too difficult, it really just requires a lot of patience and just making sure you don't ever leave yourself too low on health. Whenever you drop below a third health, you should probably heal yourself then and there, just in case Nyx does some haphazard random bullshit that just nukes you off the planet of Earth, but it's not really too much of a problematic thing, continuously using Theurgies with Scarlet Havocs to blitz through certain phases, etc, etc. It wasn't too much of a challenge. And when I got to the second last phase, I do save another Theurgy to the moment he goes into his last phase, I Armageddon him and complete the battle, finally.
What? 5 health? This is fine. Good, it's your turn, buddy. Bucko. Bang.
How are you even standing right now?
Hey, you can't be going out there by yourself.
I've done this entire journey on my own, boys and girls. Who needs a party when you can just solo them, baby?
What are you doing?
The absolute banger that's about to bang all the bangs of the bangs.
I will.
And that was my solo Makoto run. Honestly, I absolutely enjoyed this experience. There was a lot of issues that happened, especially at the start, purely because, well, when you're on your own, a lot of the things in the early game are far more punishing than what they usually would be. But ultimately, all's well, it ends well. And unlike with the Fire Emblem one, where I had watched someone else do this challenge run like years ago and made an attempt myself, this time around I went into it basically blind. Outside of the knowledge I have of Persona 3 Reload from my 2 different playthroughs, plus the episode Igus, as well as my playthrough through Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 Royal, I went into this with basically only that knowledge and tried to formulate plans from there. Granted, I did get a bit of help from people who appeared in chat from time to time, especially when it came to Arabaki and the Reaper. I never really clocked that one because I completely forgot that Arabaki can just reflect all physical attacks, and I didn't know that you could just duke the Reaper that way because he likes to use physical attacks when you've been affected by some form of status effects. I didn't know that. And yeah, as always, this was all streamed over on my Twitch account as well as on this channel here. So there is a playlist on this channel that has every single VOD if you want to see the entire run in full detail in all 40 plus hours of it. Also, if you're watching this video not long after it comes out, I'll be starting up a Persona 5 solo Joker run in like a few days. If you're watching this like a week or two afterwards, the streams have already kicked off and you'll see them on the live section of this channel. Heck, you might be watching this while I'm live. Who knows? Come join. You either might come across some Persona shenanigans, more challenge run junk, or just Yakuza, because I'm playing a lot of that too recently. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for coming by. If you did enjoy this, make sure to leave a like down below. Make sure to subscribe. But until next time, bye-bye!